The other dilemma that I faced as we were planning yesterday was not just what are we going to do? Are we going to have services? Are we not going to have services? Are we going to have kids ministry, not have kids ministry, student ministry, not have student ministry? The other dilemma I faced was, should I kick off the series this Sunday or should I push it back one more Sunday? And I ended up pushing it back one more Sunday. All right, so I know some of you may be like, well, I came today because I want to hear that series. All right, well, you got to come back next week. It's a 7-week series, I'll go ahead and tell you, so you got to commit for several Sundays. But the reason I pushed it back, one, 24 hours ago, we were still trying to decide whether or not we were having services, so I wasn't quite sure what we were going to do there. But the other reason was I had so much feedback last Sunday in response to announcing this series that I didn't want to kick it off on a Sunday that not everybody was going to be able to be here. And I know we may have a few more people watching online today than we normally do, because some folks truly live out in the country and the sun don't shine but for a couple of hours out where they live. And like they really can't get out. Or some folk, and we did, somebody fell in the parking lot this morning. It was a kid, thankfully. No, I hate to say that, but I mean, they told me somebody fell in the parking lot. I said, how old were they? But I mean, we came out this morning, but it's difficult, all right? So I decided I want to wait and kick the series off when I know everybody's able to be here, because I had so many people in response to this announcement last Sunday going, I really need to hear that. Like I'm looking forward to that. I need to hear that. That's something I want to learn more about. That's something I need to be doing this year, because what we're talking about in this series is called Be Still, Regaining Mental Health with Spiritual Disciplines. And we're talking a little bit next week about technology and how technology has affected all of us. And there's good to technology, but there's also some negative effects of technology and how it has impacted our lives negatively in regards to emotional and mental health. But then we're talking about how do we gain that ground with some of these ancient spiritual practices. So, fasting and prayer and consciousness and community. How do we kind of stay grounded in a world that is affecting us more than we realize? And so that's what we're going to talk next week. I'll kick it off next week, and we'll just push the whole schedule back by a week. So that gives us one more week to invite people to come. It gives us one more week to promote it on social media. It gives me one more week to keep reading. So I still gives me some more time to study and prepare and be ready for this. So that left me with today trying to decide, what are we going to talk about today? If we're not going to talk about this series today, what are we going to talk about today? And I basically want to do part 2 of Sedona today. So if you were last week, we went to Sedona, Arizona, and just went on a hiking trip, basically. That was our vacation. And I talked about one of the things that I learned at that trip was about God's presence, and it was the night we went stargazing, and I kind of talked about my lesson there. I want to talk this morning about another lesson that pretty much got reinforced on every single hike. But there was one in particular where it kind of rose to the forefront. And one of the things you have to do when you decide to go hiking, especially if you're hiking with your family or with a group of people, is you have to decide how much are we willing to do to see what we want to see. Like how much effort are we willing to put into this? Because you got options. You can just do the paved trails if you want to. You can just do the pull-offs. just drive to the spot, pull off, say, that was pretty, and get back in the car. Or you can do the strenuous hikes. You can do so how much effort are we willing to put in to see what you want to see? Because this is true of hiking, but I think you'll see where I'm going with this. The best views always come with a challenge. If you want to see something beautiful in the end, you're going to have to put in the effort. Now, we're still talking hiking, so give me a minute to get to that point. If you want to see something beautiful, you got to put in the effort. So that rang true for one particular hike we did at Fay Canyon. And so the first day we did this place called Boynton Canyon, and it was a little more challenging than we expected. It was great, but Fay Canyon we chose because it was easy. It was in this Red Rock secret mountain wilderness, and everything we'd read about it, it was 2.5 mile out and back, flat trail, easy. It's got 2 options to add to the difficulty if you want to. One of them is about halfway back, there was a hidden arch that you could not see from the canyon floor. So if you stay on the main trail, canyon floor, you're not going to see this hidden arch. And we looked for it while we were walking. You still couldn't see it. But you could take a little offshoot, and it only added like 4/10 of a mile to the hike, but it was 500 feet of elevation gain in that 4/10 of a mile. And by the elevation gain, it was not always to where you could stay on 2 points of contact and make it up the hill. You understand what I'm talking about? Like, there were parts in which you were kind of leaned over, climbing up, scrambling up the rocks. And when you got up there, and of course, I mean, it's difficult. It's not easy. You're gaining the elevation, you're getting out of breath, scrambling up the rocks. Other people are coming down crying, and you got past them. And so, I mean, you're still, you kind of, what have I gotten myself into? But when you got there, you discovered, it was this beautiful arch. You can't really see this great in my cell phone pictures because I wasn't planning on showing them to you. So I didn't take them horizontal. I took them all vertical, and they don't show up great on here. But it was this beautiful arch when you got up there and this beautiful view, and you could see you're at the canyon wall, and you could look out. And when we got to that point, we were like, that was worth it. I'm glad we did it. It was worth it. I'm glad we went ahead and did the extra hard part because it was worth it. They even had a part there where you could go around and try to get up on top. Now, they didn't recommend this. We tried it to get around on top of the arch. And like I've got just to show you kind of the trail. This looks worse in the picture than it actually was. I'll just you look at the ledge and like, oh my goodness, you put your children's lives in danger. No, we did not. Their lives were never in danger. If they fell, they were going to be seriously injured. But we don't think they would have died in that. But I mean, it was a ledge. It was tight. It was a little sketchy. There were points in which I was saying, be careful. What are you doing? This was the farthest we went. You can't see it. That's Chandler up there. You can't see him hardly. You see the blue shirt and the white shorts. He was trying to walk across the arch. And that's about as far as he got before my parent mode kicked in. And I'm like, stop walking. I could just envision. I was like, it was just a foot or two from the canyon side. But I was just envisioning that. So we made it. And we were coming back down. We're like, that was worth it. And we got back down. And pretty much every hike we did was like that. Like when we went up there was one called Subway Cave. You had to kind of scramble up a little section on Subway Cave. There literally was a lady crying when she was coming down. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But you get up to the top, and that's the only way you can see that view is to scramble up there to the top and see it. So every time we did it, we said it was worth it. But at Fay Canyon, when we got done with that arch, we got done with that part, we hiked back down, and we decided, well, it's close to dark. It's 45 minutes from dark. We might as well just walk on out to the end of the canyon, the head of the canyon, if you will. Might as well walk on out to that. So we walked on out the head of the canyon, and when you get to the head of the canyon, at the end, the trail ends, and you can see there's people up at the top sitting, but it's another 300-400 feet up to the top. And, this is only like 2/10 of a mile, but I mean, you can see them sitting up there, and we had to make a decision. Do we want to do that? Right? We've done our hard part for the day. Do we want to do this next part? And the decision was pretty much of the whole group, nah, we don't. We're good. We'll just turn around and hike back. I mean, we don't need to do this. But it was Roman, I think, that was like, he wanted to climb. So Roman started climbing, Willa started following him, and then pretty much, we all ended up climbing up it. And as we're climbing up it, you can't see. I mean, it's a challenging. It's not difficult. It's not impossible. That kind of thing. It's challenging, but as we're climbing up that rock, you can't see anything but the rocks in front of you. You just see the climb. You just see the effort. And somewhere midway on that one, I think it was Hallie or somebody were midway. Somebody said, "Turn around and look behind you." And when we turned around, we were at the head of the canyon, and you could just see the whole floor of the Sedona Valley, like out through there. Far in the distance there, again, pictures don't do it justice. There's Courthouse Rock, and you could just see the whole thing out there. And we just sat down, and we just sat there for 15, 20 minutes. We just sat there. And Hallie actually took a picture of me while I was sitting there. I didn't pose. This was not a posed picture for Instagram, although I did post it on Instagram. But I didn't know she was taking that picture. And I'm just sitting out there. Here's what I'm thinking in that moment. You see the sun, the shadows are hitting there, the sun's setting. What I'm thinking is that was worth it. We weren't planning on doing that, but I'm so glad we did it because that was worth it. It was worth the effort. It was difficult. It was hard. You know, I don't know if I'd do it again. You know, it's kind of one of the, like, but every time, and that was the way every single hike ended with us sitting on some view, some incredible, like this was Cathedral Rock. It's 0.6 of a mile and 800 feet of elevation gain, but you get over the crest and you just, every hike ended with us sitting there going, it was worth it. It was so worth it. I'm glad we did that. It was worth it. It was difficult, yes. It was hard, yes. But I am so glad we did that because it was worth it. Now, I want you to think about that idea in terms of our relationship. Our relationship with God, or our relationship with family, or our relationship with friends. Any kind of relationship. There is no relationship that comes without challenge. There will be times when we are scared. There will be times when we are tired. There will be times when we're not sure we can go on. There will be times that we want to turn around. There will be times that we fall and second guess our decision. There will be times that we are challenged in any relationship. This is our relationship with God. If you decide, I want to be a Christian, you know, those two men baptized, I want to be a Christian, I want to follow Jesus. That's not going to be an easy road. There will be challenge in that relationship. There will be times that you're scared, times that you're anxious, times you're not sure you've taken the right trail. You know, I mean, there will be challenge. In any of our relationships with our spouses, with our, kids, our parents, our friends, our siblings, any relationship, there will be challenges. But if you put the effort into it, it's always worth it. It's always worth it. To see something beautiful, you've got to put the effort into it. And that's true of hikes, but that's also true of relationships. You're going to have to go through. If you want to see the beautiful parts of a relationship, you have to endure the challenging parts. That was my takeaway. If you're going to see the beautiful parts of any relationship, you got to put in the necessary effort to get to the beauty. And that's not just, an idea that I've got. Scripture reinforces that in numerous places. Scripture talks about this. James in chapter 1, verse 12 says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." And that's not specifically about relationships. It's about our relationship with God. But what he's saying is, there will be challenging times. There will be challenging times in our lives. And if you can persevere through the challenging times, you'll see something beautiful at the end. I think and I know there's a lot of guys from Hope Center here. You're in the challenging time right now. There's something beautiful on the end of it. Every graduation's beautiful. It's incredible. It's awesome. We stand up, we celebrate, we applaud. It's like, that is awesome. That's the beautiful part. The challenging part's getting there. But if you'll endure the challenging part, the beautiful part's coming. Right? Here's the other one. Romans 8:1-8 says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us." Again, this is Paul writing to the Romans saying, I know you're dealing with suffering right now. I know it's a hard time right now. I know it's challenging. I know the trail is tough right now. But if you can endure this, glory's coming. The present sufferings are nothing compared to the glory. My favorite one is this one. And this is out of Corinthians. It's a little bit longer passage, but this is the one I will send to people a lot of times when they're dealing with some kind of struggle. This is the passage that I'll think to send them, because I think this is Paul being honest about the struggle, but also hopeful about the future. He's saying, yep, the present is a struggle, but there's hope in the future. He says, "We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us." He's talking about his role as an apostle. He's like, the strength to carry on, the perseverance to keep going, the way that the will to do this is not my will, it's God. It's God in me that's doing this, because I would have given up a long time ago, but I'm continuing to press forward because of God. And look at what he says there. "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed." And I like the way he puts that, because he says, we're hard pressed. We're perplexed. We are persecuted. We are struck down. He's honest about where he's at. Things are tough. This is challenging. But we're not crushed. We're not in despair. We're not abandoned. We're not destroyed. And the reason we're not is because of Christ. He talks about in verse 11, we carry around in our body the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may be revealed in our body. It's because of Christ in us that we're not abandoned. It's because of Christ in us that we're not destroyed. It's because of Christ in us that we're not crushed by these things. And he closes in verse 17. Whoops, where did I put that verse? Andy, is it in there? Yeah. He says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And you know, when you're in the middle of it, he calls them light and momentary troubles. When you're in the middle of the troubles, they don't feel light and they don't feel momentary. They feel like they're going to last forever, but they never do. They never do. They feel heavy in the moment, but what he's doing is comparing them to glory, and he's saying, when you get to the end, when you get to the beautiful part, the troubles won't seem near as bad as they were when you're in the middle of them. And if you could just fix your eyes on Jesus and endure and persevere and make it to that point, make it what is seen, what is temporary, it's what is seen is temporary, but what is seen is also the troubles. It's the beautiful part that you don't see unless you persevere and get to that part. And that's true in hiking, that's true in relationships. All right? That's true in our relationships with God and our relationships with other people. I'll go back to that screen right there. I heard something yesterday that kind of resonated with me, and I was listening to a podcast called Good Faith, and they don't normally interview folks on this one, but they had interviewed John Mark Comer, who's a pastor out west on West Coast somewhere, and they were just basically talking about, you know, kind of how to get reset in the new year. It's kind of a New Year's podcast, that kind of thing. And he said something about 20 minutes in that caught my attention, and he was talking about the fact that culturally, two things culturally. We try to avoid pain at all costs in our culture. We're a pain avoidance culture. We don't want any pain, any challenge. If we can avoid it, we're going to avoid it. And we'll try to numb our pain, whether that's with drugs and alcohol or whether it's scrolling in Netflix, we will numb our pain. We'll do anything we can to avoid pain because the appearance of pain in any part of our life indicates that something must be wrong. And that's, you know, pain can be an indicator that something's wrong. But we try to avoid pain, and then we also pursue happiness as our highest value. Because we assume that the greatest value, the most important thing in life is to be happy. And so if I'm in a relationship and I'm not happy, then that relationship is a failure. And he's talking about the idea, like, yeah, that is a value. Happiness is a value. Everybody wants to be happy, for sure. But we're not called to pursue happiness as much as we're called to pursue love. And love and happiness aren't always the same thing. In any long-term relationship, there are going to be periods of times where you are extremely happy. And there's going to be periods of time where you ain't happy. In any of those relationships. It's unrealistic to assume that our relationships are going to be nothing but unended periods of happiness. And if they're not unended periods of happiness, then I'll just give up on that relationship and move on to somebody else. That's a worldly view, and biblically, you don't see that expression at all. And I want to read to you what he said, because I listened to it this morning. I was trying to capture it, and I just never could capture it. And I was like, I couldn't find a transcript of it. I just played back the podcast, and I typed while he talked. So this is a paraphrase. I'm not exactly quoting him, okay? But he put it this way, and I'd never considered it this way before. He said, our culture just assumes that being happy in life is the highest value. And while it is a very high value, and it is an important thing, as followers of Jesus, we believe the most important thing is to become a person of love. And I'm not setting them up as opposed to each other. They can work in tandem, but ultimately love has to be our metric, and love is a form of suffering. And that's when he caught my attention, when he said love is a form of suffering. And here's the way he explained it. He said what that means is you have to patiently, quietly, joyfully endure suffering if you want to become a person of love. Because love is defined by Jesus as to will the good of another ahead of your own. And he said it was painful for Jesus to love us on the cross. It is painful to stay married. It is painful to bear patiently with your children. Now, I would add sometimes on these things. I mean, he's talking in absolutes here. I don't know that these are absolutes. But he's going off the cuff. This is an interview. I mean, if you're in a long-term relationship, you're going to go through painful parts in that relationship. Whether we're talking family, spouses, whatever. It's painful to bear patiently with your parents. It's painful to bear patiently with your siblings. It's painful to stay in a friendship long term. All love requires pain. And again, I don't know that I would have put that word require in there. Like that seems like an absolute there. But there are periods of time, I think he's 100% on point about this. There are periods of time in any relationship, including our relationship with God, where we will suffer through difficult times. You will have to suffer through difficult times because love involves a certain level of suffering. To love somebody it's not all, that's why we do the wedding vows in sickness and in health, right? And in good times and bad times, and rich and poor, regardless. I'm in the good times and in the happiness and also in the suffering. And so to love someone requires us to suffer through some difficult parts in order to get to the beautiful parts. But what I would add to it is, it's worth it. It's worth it to take the challenging path, what Jesus calls the narrow path, because it's the narrow path that leads to life, not the broad path. The broad path tells you just pursue happiness. Whoever makes you happy, pursue that relationship. Whatever makes you happy, pursue that desire. That's the broad path, but that leads to destruction because that's a temporary happiness. The eternal happiness that Jesus is talking about, you got to choose the narrow path, and he says only a few find it, but that's the pathway to life. And I'll show you real quick this. I rearranged all my slides because we changed all this in between services, but this picture here, that's what I posted on Instagram. And this is going to get into kind of what we're going to talk about next week, but that's what I posted on Instagram. What you don't see in this picture is the skinned knee where I crawled up the hill, or the dirt on my elbows where I fell when I was going up the hill. What you don't see is that, 15 seconds before this picture, I was huffing and puffing. You don't see any of that. You just see the beautiful part. You don't see the challenge that it took to get to the beautiful part, because it took a lot of work to get to the beautiful part, but you don't see any of that. Right? That's what we got to remember, is it's worth it to keep going, because God promises us, he never promises that our journey is going to be absent of fear, our journey is going to be absent of challenge, our journey is going to be absent of pain. But what he promises is that it'll be worth it. So keep pursuing love, keep pursuing relationships, keep pushing through challenges and obstacles, keep pushing through the fear and anxiety, because it will be worth it. To get to the beautiful parts, you're going to have to endure some painful parts, and it will be worth it in the end.